This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.
This is René Brooks, and welcome to Distraction. So today we are with John Hazelwood. John is an ADHD mentor for men, a fierce online advocate for men's mental health, and he is here with me today, another good buddy of mine who I'm probably just going to banter back and forth with. So this will be a fun episode.
Thank you, René. Thank you for this invitation to this platform. It is a pleasure to be able to speak and have another voice that is actually heard out here in our neurodiverse community. It's amazing. It's amazing to know that we have this space now because it's something that's long overdue. And I am very blessed to be a part of that initiative that's happening. And all I hope for is that in this conversation that we touch on many subjects that can touch someone to maybe get a little more serious about their mental health and have some people really feel connected to what we discuss.
That's what's up. I think that's the beauty of these conversations. Like, there's so many different things. Like, you never know what's going to draw somebody in. So I think that's the reason why it's important to have so many different voices in the conversation about mental health, because you need someone to meet you where you live when you're struggling with your mental health. When you're, if you want to be esoteric about it, your higher self or whatever, I think you can take in messages more easily from people who maybe don't speak your language, so to speak. But I think when you're really struggling, you don't have the bandwidth to filter that information and get it into your mind and your heart in the language you need it in. So I think that's one of the reasons why representation and a mixture of voices is so important. And I'm glad you're here because, as you know, like John and I have conversations about this all the time. I'm always ranting about it. There are not enough men of color in the space doing this work, especially in the land of ADHD. And I'm grateful for him and Mark Amoldovar because they keep hope alive for me. So, hi.
Hello. How do you do? It's a beautiful thing because it makes me think about when I started this journey. I wanted to get more serious about my mental health when I finally turned 30. And I started realizing that I had been diagnosed with ADHD back when I was 21. I had taken myself off of medication. So I was off of meds for several years. And I knew that imbalance, it was somewhere. And it was time for me to check out me and to see exactly what is this, gain understanding. Because to operate in a world where there's no understanding is almost like chaos. It's your own mental hell. And you want just an escape. You want some form of understanding so you have a basis to know how to proceed forward. And when I started touching on ADHD, I do the typical thing that most people do. We get on our phones or get on our computers, pull up Google and see what you can find. Then you have YouTube, and YouTube is an excellent resource. I feel like we can all have an educational degree from YouTube University. And when I looked at ADHD, I started noticing that there's not a lot of people of color who advocate for it. There's not a lot of men who look like me who struggle with it. And believe it or not, it is a little easier to relate to someone who looks just like you, who sounds just like you, because you feel that representation is there. That's that voice that is speaking for you in a way in which you no longer feel alone, because sometimes we can scream out loud and scream in our mind, but a lot of us have a hard time of transferring that into our own voices and projecting it out into the world. And it's where I started feeling as if, you know what, if I don't have it, why not create it? And that's where I've just never looked back. I've started sharing my story on how ADHD has impacted me in my life, how ADHD has been positive, how it's been negative, how it's been a struggle, how it's led to depression, it leads into a lot of things, even how it's connected to trauma. And it's been such a rewarding experience because I've met people I'm close with like you. I've met so many mental health advocates in the community. It feels great to feel like you're in a place where you belong and you don't feel like you're by yourself. You don't feel like you're isolated. Um, there's a very, very popular influencer named Jason Wilson. He always talks about emotional incarceration. I feel like just the term incarceration doesn't always have to deal with being inside of a physical jail. It can also be emotional, it can be very mental. And when you're dealing with ADHD and you don't have a clear understanding for it, it feels like you're incarcerated, but you're incarcerated to your mind. You're incarcerated by something that makes you you. And so it's only right for you to find a way to control your own narrative.
So, do you feel like you're in control of your narrative now? And if not, what do you need?
I feel like I'm getting better. I feel that every single day is a new learning opportunity. I don't look for perfection. It's it's one of those things where I want to learn as much as I possibly can, but also realize that I'm always going to have something to work on. I'm perfectly imperfect. I'm not broken. I'm just cracked. And with a crack, you can look at it as something that can be put back together as something that's beautiful. And that sometimes you're not always those scars. And it's a lot more to understand. It's like tracing, a route back to the seed. There's so many paths that you got to navigate through, but it's that overall understanding when you finally get there, it's going to be worthwhile.
I love that. So you mentioned isolation, and I feel like that's a big part of the journey for a lot of people of color when they're trying to figure out this diagnosis. How long did it take you before you stopped feeling that isolation? Was it creating your own resources? Was it meeting more people? Like, when did you start to feel like that was kind of soothed?
It was meeting more people, and it was meeting people who they understood me. Their mind was in dysfunction just like my mind was. It's like, am I the only person that has like 18 million TVs on right now and I'm trying to pay attention to all of them all at once? Or I got a million tabs going on. Or, you're like driving a Ferrari, but you have Geo Metro brakes and you try to press brake and you don't slow down. You just kind of keep going. Like it's just there. When you're embraced by a community, you feel validated. You feel acceptance. And I had to realize that that validation, that acceptance was something that was deep rooted in trauma as well too. Being younger, not understanding why I had a process delay in how I received information. Now, granted, I never really struggled in school as far as like academics. I did the AP courses, stayed on honor roll. My parents they were pretty tough on me when it came to education, but they were always very aware. They were very active inside of it, but it still doesn't mean that I can remember I was sitting in AP calculus and I'm just sitting there and I feel like I'm the slowest kid in the class because someone can open that book and they can read for like 15, 20 minutes and be perfectly fine to apply the theorems on the board that the teacher is sitting there wanting to teach to you as a lesson. Me, it's going to take me a little while longer, maybe an hour or two, because I have to pick it apart. I have to allow myself time to adjust to what is being sent to me without feeling as if I'm getting overwhelmed. I'm getting overstimulated. And I used to get teased by it. I used to be the last one finishing tests, and that went all the way through college. College took me 5 years in the mechanical engineering program at VCU, which I absolutely love what I've learned now. Um, I wouldn't change it. I absolutely wouldn't change it. But I struggled. I struggled because I did not understand how I processed. And it wasn't until the age of 30 where I really just grabbed a grasp of it. And it was because of people who were like me that were there to share their stories and to share their insight and to let you know that, hey, it's okay to be you.
I love that because we live in a society that really places a high value on independence. And we're really like, we're very social creatures, we're very interdependent. And we've started, like, of course, you and I were on, like, I tell people I circle the internet like 15 times a day. So whatever's going on out there, I know about it. And it's frustrating to me when people sit there and they they kind of denigrate people who feel the need for validation, because to require validation and community is human. That's not necessarily out of balance. Like, it's out of balance when your desire for validation causes you to be out of alignment with your own values and morals and beliefs. But the actual, like, just like on the face of it, the desire for validation is not problematic. And it's frustrating to me that the internet keeps trying to spin it as though it is, because it's not.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of us have to go back and look at. What were you conditioned to? What was your environment growing up? Learning that definition. What is validation? What is it to be emotionally aware? What is it to be human? What is it to be able to express your emotions and not feel judged? A lot of the times, those labels, those stigmas that were there, or just things I was conditioned to. Being a male, you had to learn how to shut up. You don't cry. You dare not cry in front of people. You don't get a voice if it's not doing anything to advance, the household forward, or something that somebody else can benefit from. You need to sit in the back and just listen. And when you're someone who's ADHD and your mind is constantly in an imaginative, you're living in your own imaginary world at times because you see things so vividly, so vibrant. Just you think outside the box because you were born outside the box. And it's hard for you to conform to what's inside the box because there are too many restraints against you and you feel like you're isolated. And when you just want to express it, there's a level of safety that you have to have. You need safe space. When that's not being created, you start to suppress. And that's why I live by a motto. It's just like express versus suppress. You have to.
I agree.
It's so important for us to be able to express ourselves because we're able to connect with our emotions. We're able to have a voice. And with ADHD, there's that emotional dysregulation. Sometimes we don't even realize all the emotions that we're going through. And we have so many that go on to the point in which you shut down, you crash. And instead of constantly being inside of that vicious cycle, I wanted to control the narrative by cutting that cycle and starting something that's new that would serve me in the long run, which is learning emotional intelligence, being emotionally aware, being able to have control over my emotions if I feel as if I'm being overloaded, so that I know how to handle a situation versus shutting down again, versus completely tapping myself out of it. And as a man, especially as a man of color, that's something that it's really missing in our communities because you see what happens to us black men when we don't express ourselves vocally. We end up angry. We react. And we react to a certain degree where we either hurt ourselves, hurt someone else, end up in a box in the ground, or we end up in a box serving a sentence with nowhere to go because you're pretty much casted away from society right then and there. And it's hard. It's very hard. And when you have ADHD makes it hard to just organize your thoughts. It just makes it hard to make sense of almost everything. So you just feel like, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. But honestly, when you really just break it down and you learn how to be gentle with yourself, when you learn how to forgive yourself from what you didn't know, what you didn't understand about what you deal with, and you start forgiving yourself and you start unpacking to understand and not to respond, then your actual responses become a little bit more clear, a little bit more calculated, and they suit you a whole lot better. And the world starts to feel like a better place to actually belong into.
I love that. Like, all of this is important. And this is, like, yet again, this is why we need additional perspectives, because these are things, like, nobody can think about what you need besides someone who lives your experience. Like, they can imagine, they can empathize their way into your shoes, but the actual reality of living your experience isn't something that anybody but you can do. And for you, especially, John, like, John is subjected to like my 5,000 rants a month about how that it's often said that Black men are overdiagnosed with ADHD, but when you are looking at the lineups for conferences and panels and calls for advocates, there's very few Black faces there to begin with, but almost no Black men in the space. And that's why, like, when I met John, I was like, oh, finally somebody, because there was, much like my own experience when I went out looking for any Black experience, there wasn't anything. And then there was me, and I met some other people, but still there weren't any. Like, I know a lot of Black men with ADHD, but will they talk about it publicly? That's the challenge. Like, I feel like as a community, we've gotten to the place where we're willing to accept depression. That's being normalized bit by bit. Like, maybe not as much as we would like it to, but we're at the point where I feel like collectively we can all say, oh, you're depressed. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I feel like our community in particular has been hit hard with the idea of you're trying to penalize our children for being children, and we're very protective of that.
Yeah, like I've spoken on it before many times through social media. It is so much more than not being able to pay attention.
Tons more.
It affects your abilities with just, your emotions, um your sense of time. It's like time blindness. It's like no matter what you try to do, it's like time does not exist to you, or time is not even your best friend. You have the over ruminating thoughts that just constantly recycle over and over, especially when you add trauma into it. Because honestly, I feel like trauma is the catalyst to almost everything that's right then and there. And it just makes, you know, our neurodiversity pop out a whole heck of a lot more. When that's there, it keeps you stuck. It's like a unwanted gift that keeps giving. That's why ADHD is a comorbidity. And so many symptoms of ADHD can exist in people with OCD, with BPD, with bipolar 1 and 2, with severe depression, severe anxiety, even autism. It's all on a spectrum of we all pull from one another. But it's almost like people just want to pay attention to the label entirely too much. And it's like when you place that label on me, you're automatically limiting me and my potential in life because I have this.
See, you know what? I disagree. I know that a lot of people feel like the label takes away, but I genuinely feel like the label is almost like receiving an instruction manual. Do you always need everything in the instruction manual? You don't. Like, there's scenarios in the instruction manual that you may never find yourself in, but if you do, you know how to sort yourself back out again. Like, the label, I think, for me anyway, like, I won't speak for everybody else, it gave me access to what I needed to get out of the scenario I had found myself in and get back on the road. Like, my car manual tells me what to do if my car is out of oil. My car's not out of oil. Lord willing, it never will be. You never know with me. I do have ADHD. I have ruined one car motor in my lifetime. But I have one time. One time. I feel like you only need to do that one time before you learn you'll never do that again. But the car manual tells me what to do if my car is out of oil. I'm not gonna be out of oil though.
There's also your preventative maintenance right then and there. Why do you have to wait for something to fail in order for you to have to pay attention to it?
Right. Like, it tells, like, that manual tells you the things that you need to do to care for yourself. And like, even though some things share symptoms, there's things that make each of those conditions distinct on their own. Even though I said to somebody the other day, because I have PTSD as well. And I also have dysthymia, which is like a very fancy word for saying that I'm like kind of permanently depressed. But in having all of those things, sometimes I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole to figure out what the symptom is. Like, okay, is it the antidepressant? Is that good? Have I been taking it? Have I been consistent with it? Okay, so it's not that. All right, it's not the ADHD, which one is it? Maybe it's the CPS. Like, so you're again, there you are with the manuals doing your diagnostics, trying to figure out like what can we do to adjust this? And sometimes there is no adjustment because sometimes it's just a natural side effect of having human emotions. Because I think that is one of the things that I've noticed for some of us. Like, we can get so far down the road of caring for our mental health that anytime we feel a twinge, we're like, break out the manuals, I got to adjust. Not necessarily. There's such a thing as overcorrecting. Like,
Yeah, it absolutely is. One of the downsides to ADHD, which can definitely be something that's it can be a positive, but it can also be a negative, is hyperfocusing.
yep,
When we are interested in a topic, we can go down a rabbit hole. When it comes to learning about our neurodiversity or any type of mental condition, we will literally drown ourselves in so much information with it, where we're constantly compare and contrast, compare and contrast, compare and contrast. And then you want to understand why, that you forget how to be present. You forget how to just sit down, be present, and just feel, just enjoy what's around you. Mindfulness, not a mind that's full. It's you can't think straight if your mind is full of 1,000 thoughts going all over the place and you're trying to decipher all of them. You need that mindfulness that is there where you're able to just pause and you are just able to just breathe because you're constantly on go. It's like life constantly has a green light. There is no red light. Don't even see a yellow light. Don't even throw that inside of there because all you're going to do is just throw me out of whack. But it's like, I know only go. And the more I got into like my mental health journey, it started to help me understand how a lot of the things that I've dealt with in life, because like Renee, I suffer with PTSD as well too. I'm a victim of early childhood sexualization through rape and molestation. And, when you're dealing with that, and then, of course, the black family household dynamic, that a lot of us, we know that narrative that's been painted out there where homes are either broken or it's very chaotic. Add all of that trauma and throw a little bit of ADHD right on top of that. That's a lot to take in. It is a cocktail of destruction. And it literally will make you feel as if, you know what, I'm only going to be able to survive life. I'm never going to be able to live. I'm constantly going to always know how to stay afloat, but I'm not going to know how to dwell above the surface because I am not good enough to dwell above that surface. And then when the ADHD kicks in, it's those recycling thoughts, the negative self-doubt, the constant emotional dysregulation in the spiral, where then your focus is completely shifted. You shut down on the most minute things that brings you back to the moments that got you there in the first place. And it's like, when does this ever end? And it's like, no, learning about my ADHD is not going to fix everything about my mental health, but it's a start. It is a start towards a new me.
it is a start. John, thank you so much for coming. Like, we've been chasing each other back and forth for weeks trying to get on here. I'm so glad that we were able to catch each other tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's so much of a blessing. This helps me along in my journey. I'm beyond appreciative for this, and I love what you're doing with this platform and the fact that, they have selected such an awesome special guest to host it for this month. We really need this. We need this opportunity to be heard, and you have no idea how many lives you're about to touch. You have no idea. So keep continuing to be you and truly authentically you.
Thank you.
And if you guys want to follow me And the work that I do,
Yes.
I'm very active on social media. So Instagram is at ADHD_John, which is J0N. And then on Twitter, I am at John_John, which is J0N_J0N. Also Facebook, we have a men's ADHD mental health support group as well too. That's run by myself and my brother and close friend with René as well too, Mark Adedovar, in which we help provide a resource to over 6,000 men that were like myself with ADHD that just wants a place to belong. And we have bi-weekly group meetings as far as talking about topics that revolve around ADHD or just having a check-in, just a casual, hey, how are you doing? Just keeping each other accountable. And that space is there. And on that Facebook page, there's a link to the Instagram page as well too, in which you can also follow up with any type of post that we have that shares factual information about ADHD, other resources, or even our podcast that we also are working with. So hopefully see you guys sometime soon. And remember, your mental health, it's everything.
Absolutely. That's a perfect stopping point. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. I feel like we could have probably talked about a whole hell of a lot of stuff.
Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our producer is Sarah Gurton. Please reach out to us and let us know what you think. Record a voice memo or write an email and send it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. I'm René Brooks. You can find me at blackgirllostkeys.com and on Twitter at BLKGirlLostKeys. Until next time.
The episode you just heard was made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.